All right, peace and blessings, everybody, and welcome to Real Talk with ZSJ. I'm Sister Zakia. I'm your host, and I'm excited to welcome Brother Quadwo and Brother Maxwell tonight to this family discussion. I'm calling this a family discussion, and I love Black people, and this has been something I have been. Kind of toying with for a minute. You know what I mean? I'm a descendant of enslaved Africans here in the United States. And so I certainly empathize and identify with a lot of what the folks at ADOS and some of the founders, particularly Tone, the economic piece, really resonates with me. And my sister-in-law is a part of the ADOS DMV region.
Hey,
Sister Latrice, shout out to Latrice. And Brother Quadwo is a good friend of mine because I also identify as a Pan-African nationalist, Black nationalist, race woman. And so I'm here to just to have a family discussion. I know that both of these brothers have a deep set of knowledge and beliefs that they can share with our audience, and I'm hoping that we all can leave, at the end of this discussion with greater respect, for each other and hopefully to build some more camaraderie and unity within the Black community. Because that, for me, that is something that is critically important, something that I think that we need in order to beat the common enemy, which to me is white supremacy. So without further ado, I want to introduce Brother Maxwell to allow him to introduce himself and share a little bit more about his background and who he is and why he's in this work.
how's everybody doing? First of all, I want to thank you for providing this space. I think it's really important. First of all, I want to start off by saying, even though I am ADOS, my parents on both sides, my great grandparents from Mississippi, I'm not a national spokesperson for ADOS. Even though I am a member of ADOS Chicago, I'm still not a spokesperson for ADOS Chicago. So I just want to, throw that out there because ADOS is now a specific organization, it's a 501c4. So we got chapters all around the United States. So I thought it was appropriate that I say that. And if anybody has like any specific question, I might direct them to the Tone or Yvette, and they may be able to address that specifically. But as far as me, like I said, I'm from Chicago, born and raised. I am a product of the Great Migration. My grandfather came here in like the 1930s, and we from Inglewood on the south side of Chicago. My granddad owned a gas station back in the early 60s. I'm just a guy who's always been committed to like movement spaces and organizations. From my involvement with the recent groups in Chicago, the I don't forget what I was involved in Chicago, but no. Hey, what was the group? I forgot. But I did a whole bunch of group work here in the city. I worked on J.B. Pritzker for governor campaign and field organizer. I worked on LaShawn Ford, mayor of Chicago campaign 2018. I graduated from the University of Missouri with MED in Educational Leadership and Policy Analysis. I was part of a historic movement, organizing movement at the University of Missouri, Concerned Student 1950, which we presented demands to the university and got rid of the president there. So that's who I am.
Yeah, that's where I remember you from.
Yeah.
That was good work. Yeah, you made national headlines with that. I remember that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, brother. And thanks for being here. Brother Kwado, and please introduce yourself to the audience for folks who may not know you and tell us more about your passion and why you're passionate about the work that you do, brother.
Okay, good. Greetings, good people. My name is Kwado Wayne Detterville. First name Kwado, just got recently in 2019 with a beautiful trip to Ghana, to Accra, Ghana. And my wife and I, in a ceremony in the Akan village there, were given new names, new family names, and actually gained like a new family there in Ghana. So that's the name, where the name Kwado comes from. I am from a family that has deep roots here in the United States, this part of the African diaspora too, in Louisiana. My folks are from Bogalusa and New Orleans, Louisiana. And so, I see that in a beautiful way too, because once my consciousness expanded surrounding the African diaspora in Africa, I began to understand Louisiana, especially New Orleans, as part of the African diaspora. And in some scholars' minds and scholarship, they characterize it as basically the Northern Caribbean. Once you hear about all the influx and outflux of history and traffic and things of that nature that have gone on over the past couple of 100 years from that region, it becomes much more complex than just a couple of states in the United States. So having said that, I'll say this, is that my interest in scholarship has to do with visual culture, and I consider myself to be an African-centered scholar. So I focus on visual culture, all things that lie in the visual field, and specifically Black visual culture. So sometimes in my explanations, I try to use cultural or aesthetic examples of what I'm explaining in my explanations of Pan-Africanism. I even coined a term for it in doing my graduate thesis, my master's thesis in visual and critical studies. I coined the term Afriscape, which hopefully I'll get a chance to explain while we're here having this discussion. I'm also somebody who is, I'm going to throw this in there because it's what led me to my understanding of the diaspora, or a deep understanding of the diaspora, which is that I was a longtime practitioner of the African Brazilian martial art capoeira. And so in 1988, I took a trip down to Bahia, Brazil, and Sao Paulo and Rio, and was able to see a lot of African people in that area of the world, where there are, exponentially way more people of African descent there than any other part of the diaspora. And so the common denominators that I experienced in that was a revelation for me. It made a lot of things about African identity open up like a beautiful flower. My first basically encounter with Pan-Africanism came in my undergraduate studies in the early 1980s. I'm 60 years old. So, part of these eras, I understand from a firsthand experience. I remember the day Martin Luther King died. I began my undergraduate studies in the early 1980s. So one must, take into consideration what the landscape was like at that particular time and what I may remember firsthand. My first activism was doing the flyers and graphic work in conjunction with the Black Women's Collective at Mills College in Oakland. And we were doing things raising consciousness around the Atlanta child murders. So this is just give you a scope of time of where my activism begins, up until this point. And I'm currently a lecture professor in the Africana Studies Department at San Francisco State University, which is the first Black Studies department in the country. Some say the world. And so I'm honored to be part of that organization. Also founded an organization with my wife called Sankofa Cultural Institute, in which we've done various projects over a period of the last 2 decades that have to do with education and arts, connecting people of the African diaspora with people here in North America. So that's it.
Man, that's beautiful. And to me, I feel like both of you all have set the groundwork, where we're going to have what I believe is a very important conversation tonight. Brother Maxwell, I wanted to come back to you and just ask you, if your journey was a little bit similar to mine in terms of like what attracted you as a young person, as an activist, to the ADOS movement. And one of the things that I noticed is because the movement has grown, like from YouTube to it's like you said, there's chapters, and it's I guess quote unquote mainstream, with it being on Kwamo Bell or whoever that brother is on CNN and all of that. But what attracted you to the movement, and why are you involved in the movement?
What attracted me to the movement was basically an identification with the data, the wealth data. I come from a household of 10 brothers and sisters, and we didn't grow up wealthy at all. And just understanding the landscape of Black people in Chicago. Like I said, I live on the south side of Chicago, grew up on the south side of Chicago. And just growing up and witnessing the poverty and living the poverty, living in the type of environments where, it's extremely segregated, where you got white folks up north, Black folks out south and west, and we can't get jobs downtown. And you understand how growing up, when you start to become conscious of race and the economics and the social political structure in your city, and then you look at it from a state perspective and then a federal perspective, you understand that, wait, something ain't right. And I began to see that when I was an undergrad going into DePaul University downtown up north with a bunch of white folks, and I began to see how they navigated campus way differently than I navigated campus. I had to stay at home with my parents, while a lot of those students were staying on campus and downtown, metropolitan area. So for me, it was really recognizing and understanding that I was always living the wealth, that racial wealth data. And when I first heard about the ADOS movement, I was working on State Representative Ford's mayoral campaign. I was his consultant and his digital strategic campaign manager. And what I noticed was when Darity had came to speak at the Chicago State University, and he was talking about reparations.
Sandy Darity from Duke, right?
Yeah, Dr. William Darity from Duke. And he was specifically talking about reparations from a perspective that I never heard it before. And that was from, the specifics of American descendants of slavery. And I grew up in Chicago, so Chicago has a big Pan-Africanist, landscape. we rock the red, black and green flag. We believe in, fighting against Western imperialism and all that. But I never heard reparations from the perspective that Darity had brought it. And when I got introduced to ADOS through Darity and doing my own research about ADOS and looking up Yvette and Tone, I was hooked, because everything that they were saying was right. I reviewed the data on my own. I went to the conference as well in 2019, and that's how I became, a loyalist and a reparationist. That's what I call myself now. I'm a reparationist. It was just pretty much the data and understanding our position in America.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, brother. And want to pivot to Brother Kwado. And you had given us, your background in terms of your family here, and also your travels and connecting with other African people, if you will, in the diaspora in Brazil. And I believe you've traveled as well to the continent. Tell us from your perspective, because I know you have some tension with the ADOS movement. Tell us a little bit from your perspective, where that tension rises, and where do you think some of the shortcomings from your perspective is on the movement?
Okay. A couple of things. One, there's a certain degree of, I believe, unnecessary divisiveness and xenophobia in regards to other African people, other global African people. We have to be, honest and candid about that. Yvette's come on the air at one point and declared Pan-Africanism dead, which is, in my opinion, the deepest of betrayals. And of course, we've heard Tone give his anxiety in regards to African immigrants coming into the continental United States and things of that nature. And this, I think, overdetermined anxiety about them taking resources from Black folks who live here, when in reality, we both have a larger enemy to be fighting against, and shouldn't fall underneath an easily manipulated divide and rule like that one. That's an old one that we were working on mending. And if one has a sense of history, you can see, dating back to the 19th century and early 20th century, some real deep connections between Jamaican folk and, other folk, Cubans and other folks coming into the United States that did a lot of good collaboration, political collaboration. Garvey had, clubhouses and headquarters in Cuba, as well as other places like South Africa and places of that nature. And a lot of the people that come into our purview as coming from the diaspora, or rather coming to our purview as being Black folks in America, are actually from other parts of the diaspora. I mean, we can talk about Stokely Carmichael, who became Kwame Ture, people coming from Trinidad and Jamaica, Garvey coming from Jamaica, et cetera, and so forth. There's all these different passages back and forth that I think make us more connected than separated over some resources. Okay, there's that aspect of it that I find problematic. Secondarily, there's also the designation American descendants of slaves, which is basically ahistorical. We can see in the late 18th and early 19th century that Absalom Jones and Robert Allen created the Free African Society. So these are Black folks who became our basically first political activists, real, strong political activists forming groups here in the United States, in Philadelphia. And when they designated themselves as such group, they did not claim to be Americans. They understood themselves to be Africans, and they understood themselves to be, when they were enslaved Africans. And so this term, American descendants of slavery, the institution slavery, is not just ahistorical, but is also some kind of it's retrograde scholarship as well. This calling African people in America, enslaved in America, slaves in history books has been a faux pas that's been corrected now over the last couple of generations with African-centered scholarship that understands these our people, our ancestors, to be enslaved Africans. And so, continuing to use this kind of, anachronistic term is something that's more detrimental to us than it does help. The term that you designated, Sister Zakiya, is historically accurate, places us here on this continent, as enslaved Africans, and is specific to our history. One would ask why it is so-called ADOS hangs on to this term, American descendants of slavery, and also hangs on to the American flag that we see waved most often with its leadership and a good deal of its followers. Now, I love all of my brothers and sisters, and my good brother here, Maxwell. I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue our dialogue and everything after this, and that we, that most of the family that's listening to this here in the audience can do so as well, because I'm about unity. Pan-Africanists, as a matter of fact, as a definition, is about the unification of Black African people and African sovereignty on a global scale. So let's be clear about that we started the conversation in regards to that, and also started the conversation in regards to reparations as well. Let's be clear about that. So there's no issue. We don't have any, we have no conflict with the notion of getting reparations from neo-European nation states on a global scale. You understand? And with that, on a global scale, of course, there's going to be specificity on each piece on the various parts of the diaspora and the Afroscape, but it must be on a global scale. So I guess my two questions would be, one, what is the need to stay attached to this anachronistic term in order to talk about the specificity of the African experience in the Americas, or in this North American neo-European nation state? And also, what is the anxiety with having a continuity with the Pan-Africanists that created the discussion about reparations to begin with? This is just a historical fact. People like Queen Mother Moore, Marcus Garvey talking about what needs to be returned to us in speeches dating back as far as 1919. That's just a historical fact. So
yeah, this is really good, and I appreciate that that background. One of the things that I think that I heard clearly is the economic anxiety when I heard Brother Maxwell talk, which is why I asked him specifically what attracted you to the ADOS movement, and it was similar for me in terms of when I started to listen, because I'm like, well, what is ADOS? Like, what does that mean? And Brother Kwado, as a Pan-Africanist, I also took issue with like the term itself, and I use enslaved Africans because I think that it's important. To have the right language about our ancestors, and giving empowered to them in that way. But one of the things that I wanted to pull out is the economic anxiety that Brother Maxwell talked about, because that's very real, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at, and I've been talking about economics on this platform, but also just in general. And one of the things that I started to see as an activist traveling all across the country was that in any city I went to, no matter what part of the country I was in, whether it was north, south, midwest, as you all know, I live in the DC region. When you see homelessness encampments, they full of Black folks.
Yeah.
They're not full of other, whatever people of color or groups of people. And so that continued to bother me, because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm in this activist world, I'm in this do-gooder world, and I'm going to all these conferences and stuff, and I'm like, well, we ain't talking about everything, man. Like, we're not talking about what's really going on with our people, and I'm looking at the continued decline as well in terms of gentrification and all of these things. And so I wanted to kind of kick it back over to Maxwell, number one, to see if you had sort of a response to and if you wanted to answer some of the questions that Brother Kwado raised.
Yeah, thank you for that. First of all, I want to clear up some miscommunication or misconceptions about ADOS. First of all, like I said, I went to the conference in 2019 in October in Louisville, Kentucky, and I can tell you, as an individual who drove 4 hours to Kentucky, I wouldn't drive or participate in a movement that had any type of xenophobia involved with it. So first and foremost, ADOS is not xenophobic. Just because a movement bases itself on specificity doesn't mean that we're creating division. I mean, the purpose of specificity is to talk about how you're different from other individuals, and ADOS are different from just general Black immigrants. And I think we have ignored that under the framework of Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism tells us that we aren't supposed to identify as Americans. But at the end of the day, all I know is how to be an American. I was born here in America. I wasn't born in Ghana. I wasn't born in Nigeria. I can't connect no roots back to Nigeria. I don't even speak any language of an African tribe, whether we're talking about the Congolese or whatever. Like here in Chicago public schools, they don't even teach those type of language. The language you basically taught is languages of individuals or individual groups are in close proximity with you, like Spanish or French or sometimes Mandarin, depending on what school you go to. So to say that individuals can't identify as American, I find that kind of problematic, because at the end of the day, we are American. We built the greatest country on this earth, and that's what ADOS is saying. ADOS is about seeking reparations for chattel slavery here in the U.S. And when in 1989, when Callie House and Isaiah Dickerson, when they organized for reparations in America, they organized under the guise of for 1.9 million ex-slaves in America, not in the Caribbean, not over in anywhere else, specifically in America. So I think we have to understand that we are American descendants of slavery. There is no getting around that. And I understand how Pan-Africanism functions, and I understand how Pan-Africanism views. Like I got bashed, or I got basically looked at differently because now I identify as American. For a long time, I didn't want to identify as American because of the number of atrocities that they put up on Black people. But at the end of the day, when we don't identify as American, when we built the greatest nation on this earth, we reject the claim that we're specifically owed here in the United States. And I don't think Pan-Africanists understand that. But what was your question again regarding what was your question?
No, I was saying in terms of the economic anxiety that you talked about, like that's what attracted you to the movement. It seems like, at least from my perspective on the outside looking in, that that's the root of it, because the reparations and being connected with Sandy Darity and others is really, it's an economic claim. It's not, I mean, so for me, I will say, I'll speak for myself, I'm not so much as concerned about identifying as American, but I am concerned about the economics. I am concerned about, like what you said, what's rightfully owed in terms of not just for slavery. I mean, we got to come all the way up to peonage. We got to come all the way up to sharecropping. We got to, there's a bunch of different claims that Africans in the United States actually have. And for me, I think that's a righteous discussion to have. Now, in terms, yeah, go ahead.
When you say Africans, you have to identify specifically who you're talking about, because you got Africans who are from who migrate to the United States and they're not a part of the claim. So you have to identify who you're specifically addressing. So like in grad school, I had PhD colleagues who were from Tanzania and Ghana, Tanzania and in Ghana, respectfully. Now they understood that we weren't the same. They would call me Lost Boy, and I took no offense to that because I knew what they meant. I knew that I couldn't trace back no roots, to any country in Africa, and they knew that they weren't a ADOS. So when we say Africans, we have to specifically address what we're talking about, and that's the designation of American descendants of slavery, not slaves. That we're talking about the institution of slavery. I think that specific designation has to be respected because now we get to carve out who's eligible and who's not eligible for the reparations claim here. See what Cobra has done since 1989, working with John Connors, introducing the HR 40 bill, which hasn't went anywhere in the past 31 years. This is the first time in 2019, 2020 where we saw the most signatures by U.S. congressional reps in 31 years. And Cobra hasn't been able to move the needle as far as moving reparations because they moving it under the framework of a global claim, which doesn't work here in the United States when you're trying to specifically get reparations for individuals who descend from chattel slavery here in this country, Jim Crow, the failures of Reconstruction, being locked out of Homestead Act of 1826 all the way to 1986, where about 3 million white Americans got 160 acres of land. The individuals who were locked out of that were specifically Black Americans here in the United States, not Black immigrants. So they can't just come over here and say, yeah, I'm a part of the claim. No, we have to get specific. And then we have to also understand that you might have a Black immigrant who comes to America and they may be descendants of slave traders. How is it that now they eligible for reparations just because they're Black? When we get into that type of thinking and that type of framework, we're engaging in what I call lineage blindness. Well, we don't see lineage, we just see the surface of race. And that becomes dangerous because now we're masking race, and now we're erasing lineage.
Right, and I'm gonna bring you in, Brother Kwado. I wanted to ask you one other question before I bring Brother Kwado in to respond. Do you think with where the country as the United States, so that's what we're talking about, America, United States, do you think where we are economically as a country, and I don't know like if you like looked at it in terms of like GDP, how much money the Treasury is printing to keep the economy propped up and all of that kind of stuff, like really looked at it. Do you believe at this juncture in history that descendants of enslaved Africans in this country will actually realize reparations?
Oh yeah, I definitely think reparations is definitely doable here in the United States. During the 2008-2009 subprime mortgage crisis, we saw the Treasury Department issue a $16 trillion check to big banks, a blank check. It's possible. I mean, we just saw during the first stages of the Relief Act, that the CARES Act that the congressional and President Trump signed. We saw $2.5 trillion signed with and done with no problem. So the money is there. We can't sit up here and act like reparations is impossible when we know it's very possible. And we actually don't.
It's just not the political will. You feel like the political will just isn't there. That I guess that's what I'm asking. Not whether.
Yeah. We have to make Congress and the federal government do reparations specifically for American descendants of slavery, not just for descendants of African slaves, because the claim is here in the United States and is owed to the descendants of those individuals who bear the fruit and who built this country. Not everybody Black, and that's not xenophobia.
Now, I know you've seen other groups of people, because I'll tell you like this, my own, I feel so much tension with the focus on Black immigrants when they're really not the majority of so-called immigrants. When you think about it, it's Latinos, it's Asians, it's all kind of other.
But we know that Asians aren't a part of our reparations claim.
Latinos are asking for reparations. Latinos are asking for reparations.
Well, if they want to
Some
make
ran.
their own, they can make their own claim. You know, Japanese
Yeah.
Americans got reparations in 1989, but then not all Asians got reparations though. So we got to be
Sure. Okay, Brother Kwado, I wanted to bring you in. I see you itching to get in. Come on in,
Yeah,
brother.
there's so much that went by that I wanted to address. I hope I don't leave something out. Okay. So yeah, I don't know if people seen this book before.
Yeah, he quit the country. I love Randall Robinson. I'm about ready to do the same thing.
Yeah, Randall Robinson's The Debt, you know, began a discussion, or not even began a discussion, but, you know, raised great discussions in regards to the economics of reparations, you know, a couple of decades ago. This was a bestseller. This is not new to the conversation. And Trans Africa is an organization that has, you know, helped to foment change in battling, you know, apartheid and many other things that we could go into Randall Robinson's history, which I'm not going to digress into right now. My point just is that discussion of the economics and the specificity of it is not something new to the discussion. There are people that just came to understanding this stuff since Ta-Nehisi Coates and Darity began writing about it in recent memory. So these discussions have been part of, you know, Pan-African discussions for a long period of time, and part of Pan-African activism for a long period of time. I did I forgot to in my introduction to say this, which is that just earlier this year in February, I did another discussion with a representative from ADOS, and he didn't seem to be aware of this particular book either. But I framed my discussion in a way that I think might give us an understanding of what the differences are between ADOS and the, you know, the economic specificity and all those things, and understanding that those people who are African nationalists or Pan-African nationalists and Black nationalists have a different understanding of the structural anti-Blackness in Western culture, not just specific to this particular neo-European nation state that we live in now that's called America, but this ailment of anti-Blackness that ails whiteness on a global scale. All right. So you have a kind of, there are these layers. Structurally underneath, there's this sedimentary thing that goes on in the libido in the mind of white people across, you know, European Western culture, that what you're looking at when you look at Black people is not quite human. This is a fact. There are people that are, you know, parsing this out now. You know, there's a scholar named Frank Wilderson talking about it. Francis Cress Welsing and other, you know, psychologists, Black psychologists have touched on this thing before, where you have to understand that when you come into the visual field and your image that is, you know, being vandalized daily in a lot of popular culture and popular music, is because this society, the corporations that run in it, the media that creates images and all those things, have dehumanized the image of Black women and men over a course of several centuries now. And so when you're bringing up, trying to propitiate this type of oppressor, the thing that you're trying to get from them is they're not capable of hearing it. And unless we gain the same power, like, you know, there's a quote in this book where Robinson says that the thing that will get us actual payments and reparations is if we are utilizing and wielding the same power that got us enslaved to begin with. Unless you can force the issue, this will not happen. This notion that you can come up with better words or a better polemic, a better argument for this particular administration or the neo-colonial Blacks that have found their way into bureaucratic offices in Washington, somehow or another you're coming up with a better argument, that is a pipe dream. It has already been proven historically false. So what needs to be done is a force of power that is gained by gaining allies on a global scale and having control over your own definitions of what power is. So with that, I wanted to throw up this one slide, the Wade Nobles quote, Sister Zakiya, if we can.
Yep. I will get that pulled up for you right now. Just allow me to share my screen. And just give me just a second, you guys. This has been great so far. I'm glad. And the comments, as y'all know, is all the way live.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Let's struggle together.
All right. And so just kind of let me know if you can see this. I got it pulled up.
Yeah, I forget which one. Maybe it's the yeah, that one.
There
right
you go.
there we go. I just want people to be able to read it, while I'm saying it, which is that this quote is by one of the founders of the Association of Black Psychologists. Oops, it went away. Got
There
something
you
up.
go. Sorry, I'm pulling it back up. Sorry.
Okay. Dr. Baba Wade Nobles is a brilliant scholar, one of our most brilliant living African-centered scholars. And he says, he has a famous quote for what the essence of power is. He says, the essence of power is the ability to define someone else's reality and make them live according to that definition as though it were a definition of their own choosing. Okay. Now, the historically substantiated fact is that African peoples were tortured and terrorized into coming to this landmass that was then renamed after the genocide of the First Nations people here was renamed America. Okay, that is a historically substantiated fact. These people, both these First Nations peoples and the African peoples who came here, include that were famous for being here, people like Crispus Attucks and Frederick Douglass and all these other people, were forced into the definition American. And at their first chance to form an organization where they had autonomy to name themselves, as I stated before, they formed the Free African Society. And the one place where Black people could gather without much scrutiny or much overt scrutiny from the white status quo was in the churches. And so, immediately thereafter, those same two brothers founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church, not the American Methodist Episcopal Church. You dig? Okay. So the reality is that what people have done is that they have accepted a definition that was imposed on us by terrorism and chattel enslavement. And now they're using it as a definition as if it were of their own choosing and giving loyalty to a nation state that to this day is trying to exterminate you. Anybody can turn on the news and take a look at what militarized police departments in this country are doing. And the very nucleus of militarized policing in this country was invented to suppress Black communities. Look at the origins of SWAT in Los Angeles. Look at what happened to MOVE in Philadelphia. Look at the details of that, where they will actually drop a bomb on your community. This is why those things exist. And policing also is this extension of the notion that all white people are sanctioned to police Black bodies. So that's where you get the what do you call them? Barbecue Becky's and others like that. How many times have you been in various places where someone white, someone younger than you, it feels the right to inquire why you're there and who you are and basically interrogate you, for your presence, because the police are both uniformed and ununiformed. This is what kind of dehumanization you're dealing with when trying to present some rational argument to someone as if you are a human being, when what's going on in their libido and their subconscious is that I am not looking at a human being that deserves reparations or reciprocity the same way another human being would. That is the reality of structural anti-Blackness in Western society. So I'm going to give one other definition of power. This one was given by Huey P. Newton. I hope the slide is there, Sister Zakia.
Yeah, I can pull it back up. I'm sorry. No problem.
Yeah.
I actually went through all the slides while you were talking, but I will actually pull that back up. Just give me just a second here.
Okay. I don't know if I'm going to even need all of them, but I was just saying in case I needed some visual aids that I could go to something, and I like for people to be able to read it while I'm saying it.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. It's just my computer is taking forever. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. So the second one is relatively famous as well, by the founder of the Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton, and he says to us, power is, first of all, the ability to define phenomena, and secondly, the ability to make this phenomenon act in a desired manner, right? Okay, so the first phenomenon that we have to identify is what the global scale of what has been extracted from us is. And there's a scholar that I know, my colleague in the Africana Studies Department at SFSU, Dr. Ifeitayo Flannery, and she was talking about reparations and some things that she's doing in her scholarship. And she's saying, you know, it will take several years actually to get at the specificity of how much the debt is. And people are coming up with more dimensions to this as time goes on. I was looking at something just the other day in regards to there's global banks. So my brother here was saying that, you know, that these African quote unquote immigrants that come here may not necessarily be the victims of slave enslavement, but they were still victimized in Nigeria by the very same armies that were financed by, say, Barclays Bank. And Barclays Bank,
But what if they come
Barclays
from
Bank
slave?
was it
What if they come from
ensuring.
descendants of slave
I'm
traders?
sorry. And,
What about the descendants of slave traders in various countries and
oh,
Congolese and
I'm
Ghana
about
and
to get to that, my
Nigeria?
brother. I'm about to get to that. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't want to forget that part. So the Barclays Bank also sold insurance on the bodies of Black folks here in America. Like these slave owners would get insurance in case they lost something, and they were paid. You know, if once enslavement ended, some of them were paid, and so you must understand this thing not in some narrow ahistorical manner and without a clear understanding of geopolitics to understand the global nature, interconnected nature of capitalism and how it came to be on the bodies of Black people on a global scale. And so what we're going to propitiate is all of Western culture, or rather not propitiate, but demand of all of Western culture that they basically pay back what they have taken. And what to do that, we must be able to define the phenomenon correctly, and secondarily, cause it to act in a desired manner. And for that, that requires power. I'm going to recommend this particular text here in Understanding Capitalism and Slavery on a Global Scale. It's Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams. Okay. My brother here brought up the notion of the African slave trader, which is, in my opinion, an overdetermined figure in the histories. There are far more histories of people, Akan people, Central African Kikongo people under Nzinga, all these people fighting wars against slavery. And Nzinga even said that all African peoples who escaped slavery in other nation states can come to the Kingdom of Congo and will be declared free. It was basically the paradigm for the Maroon societies that happened on this side of the Atlantic. So this notion that there are some elite there in Africa to this day, this is a myth, that somehow or another have gained some degree of wealth off the bodies of selling African people is a myth. I'm going to direct.
It's not a myth. It's not a myth.
Well,
they are actually descendants in Nigeria and other countries in Ghana as well, where they have gained substantial wealth. It was just a recent article that was written from one of the scholars in Nigeria, where he went in detail and he talks about the individuals who over there and those families who still live in there, who have a substantial amount of wealth. And that he talks about the statues that still up of those individuals who were slave traders. And we know from scholarly research that there were millions of slaves sold by black slave traders in African countries during the transatlantic slave trade period. So I want to make sure that we don't ignore that. And I'm not trying to make that like the pinpoint of the argument to say why Black immigrants who come to the United States aren't included in ADOS reparations claims. It's just evident that, like I said, in 1898, when Callie House and I forgot his last name, when they were organizing for reparations, it was specifically for individuals enslaved in the U.S. And I don't understand like the Pan-Africanist. To me, it's real scattered. It's real scattered, because when you're talking about a specific claim, you're talking about specific redress and specific claims. So if I was hit by a Pepsi truck and you was hit by a Walmart truck, our claims are not the same to the same institution. My claim is going to be the Walmart, and your claim is going to be the Pepsi. Now, there's I forgot 2 African countries. They just, I think it's Rwanda or something like that, and is it the Congolese? They just brought up claims against Belgium. So They taking their claim to Belgium. Haiti should take his claim to France. Places in the Caribbean are taking their claims to the British and the CARICOM reparations movement, and they do not specifically include ADOS. So I don't understand.
And
said,
that is the fallacy.
Is real scattered, because first of all, we have to take care of home before we take care of anything else. It's like how can we take care of the globalized country and elsewhere if we don't first fix home?
Brother,
I think if I can interject really quickly, just real quick, I think and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brother Kwado, what I understand is that you're saying that capital is what's global. Capitalism is globalized, which I think just to be real with y'all, because I mean, I feel like we've spent a lot of time on Black immigrants, and I hope we can get to white folks at some point, because that's what that's where the money coming from. They control all the wealth at the end of the day in the United States and globally. And so the other thing that I wanted to say in terms of global capital is that is real. I mean, when you look at what's happening with money and who is controlling wealth, you actually see the right wing. They're actually pushing back on globalism because they see that their own lives have deteriorated here in the United States because capital has gone global, because everybody in America is competing with everybody in all kind of other countries and things like that. That's why you see this rise really in Trumpism. You see this rise in people who are pushing back. And I mean, I live here in the DC area, so these people were marching through DC streets this last weekend, vandalizing Black churches and yelling 1776. So I just want to make sure we make the connections of what's happening with regards to global capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to say that, ask my brother this. Are you familiar with the 1983 OAU, Organization of African Unity conferences that was held at, it was the first Pan-Africanist conference on reparations in Abuja, Nigeria. And the title of the theme of the thing was From Harare to Harlem. So this discussion in regards to the specificity of both and the connections between those has been had, decades ago. This type of connection is what's being broken up. These are the things that we're being distracted away from. And the people who distract us away from them are basically the white status quo. They can convince Black folks that our identities are centered around these neo-European nation states. And Nigeria, too, is a neo-European nation state. The word itself, Nigeria, is not in any indigenous African language. It comes from Niger area. It's actually, when you say it specifically, it was named by the governor's wife of Nigeria, and it means basically N-word area. And they kept this name. What I'm saying with this is that there's misunderstanding in regards to identity, nation state identity on both sides of the Atlantic. This is what I meant in regards to the degree of consciousness that people have with these things. Otherwise, to Sister Zakia's point about putting in white folks in here, their white identity, so-called white identity and European Western identity understands itself as a unity in its philosophy, ideologies, opinions, and actions. So when you talk about the Belgians in Rwanda, these are the French Belgians. These are basically the same people that were in the Congo in the 19th and early 20th century committing genocide. Some of these very same French people they are the same people, the same descendants as the French who were in Haiti. They understand themselves as a connection. This is one of the reasons why you have a thing like a European Union, or a UN, that they understand the unity. African people in various parts of the diaspora in the continent, we are the only ones sitting around parsing up our identities into these small, overdetermined, specific splinters against each other, and using identities that have been imposed upon us, like I said before, accepting someone else's definition of power and accepting it as our own, whether you be a Nigerian or whether you be a quote unquote Black American.
Well, there's always been tribes, and we always have been differentiated ourselves based on like tribalism and other things like that. So I
Tribe.
I don't understand that.
Let's talk about the word tribe. Let's talk about the word tribe.
But no, I want to focus.
We didn't call ourselves. We didn't have tribes, brother. That too is another definition that was imposed upon us. The notion of tribalism and quote unquote tribes. African kingdoms, nation states, and federations did not call themselves tribes. The Yoruba that spread across Ghana, Benin, and a huge swath of Nigeria are a larger population than the population probably of Scandinavia. Yet people think of them as a quote unquote tribe, which is derived from a Latin word, tribus, which meant to give tribute to Rome. It was another word used to divide us up. You see what I'm saying? Listen, that kingdom of Congo that the Belgians, that King Leopold invaded, that thing stretched from Central Africa all the way to present-day Angola, a huge swath of land that was federated, used one currency, and had a single language. That's why them white folks wanted to come down there and break it up. There was that national unity was already in effect. It was already working.
What does all that have to do with getting reparations here in the United States, specifically for American descendants of slavery?
I'm glad you asked that question. What it has to do with this is that by historical example, we see that if you build a geopolitical base of power, you can force the issue. How do you think the United States is an empire? Western Europe is part of an empire. Britain was an empire. It's a very small swath of land, but what they did was they went out and conquered the rest of the world, and they unified with other Europeans to do that. Like sat down at a table and planned it out, carved up Africa at the Berlin conference and said, you take this, you take that. They got together and had a plan globally. They didn't say, nah, I'm gonna go get my own thing. No, we're British, y'all are German over there. I don't want you, getting into my business at all.
Right.
I'm just gonna go here and get my own.
We understand Western imperialism. But a global claim has already been tried though. Malcolm X and them tried that back in the 60s. And it didn't do well. It wasn't successful.
But we've tried reparations. We've also tried reparations in the past. I think so. I want to try to get to.
Tried reparations. We've never tried reparations from a specificity standpoint that ADOS is bringing to the table. We've never done that. We've never done that in the United States.
So you're saying that when Queen Mother Moore was arguing for reparations, she wasn't arguing for reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans?
She was, but she wasn't specifically arguing for American descendants of slavery. Not everybody who's been enslaved under the diaspora. That is different. We have never done that before. That's why I'm saying ADOS is a unique, specific movement. When we talk about the wealth data, 90% of American households, 90% of the wealth in American households is controlled by white households. Only 2.6% for Black Americans. When we're looking at that is specific to a group who built this country, who were denied 40 acres in 1865 from the veto of Andrew Johnson on down to failures during Reconstruction, on down to Homestead, which I mentioned earlier, on down to FHA, specifically saying you're prohibited from buying homes here. This specific group is prohibited from buying homes, and white folks are prohibited from selling homes to this specific group. Jim Crow was to a specific group, and this is the reason why we see that 90% and that 2.6%. So we're specifically talking about now. This is the group that's identified. We're carving this space out and saying we're not talking about descendants of African slaves. We're specifically talking about individuals who descend from chattel slavery here in the United States, in America, the institution of slavery, the institution of legalized Jim Crow, the institution of this discrimination and generational atrocities, from police brutality, mass incarceration, being locked out of wealth because you can't buy homes, because you can't even go to the bank and get a loan. This is a specific group here in the United States of America, not across the globe, that we're bringing this claim to the federal government. It has never been tried before.
So listen, so are you proposing then, my brother, are you proposing, because this has never been tried before, and this is a better argument that you're going to propose to the government, that somehow or another, with all those things you just mentioned, with the redlining and Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff, and all of the efforts that this government has historically put itself through in order to dehumanize African people up until this very day in 2020, are you proposing then, because this is some different request, that this government is going to acquiesce and then begin giving reparations to African people here in America?
I believe we are, yes, I believe we are more closer than ever before. See, the reparations movement haven't been on this type of scale since the Reconstruction era, where all of 2020 candidates for president have addressed reparations. This hasn't been done since the Reconstruction era. We're talking about 155 years. 155 years.
What did Joe Biden say about reparations?
Joe Biden said Joe Biden has mentioned reparations. He's talking about the racial wealth gap. That's because of ADOS momentum.
Whoa.
Every presidential candidate has talked about reparations, even Donald Trump.
Yeah, Joe Biden does not support reparations, though, unfortunately.
Reparations, which is not surprising.
Obama didn't either, unfortunately.
I mean, I understand that, but Joe Biden said he's for a study. Joe Biden said he's for a study. Donald Trump said he doesn't see it happening. What I'm saying is the reparations conversation and the movement hasn't been like this since the Reconstruction era of 1865, and that is evident. And like I said, 31 years.
I would take issue with that point I would take issue with that point with all of the history that we just talked about a moment ago, brother. That is part of the discussion for. It makes
Johnny Cochran,
because you're younger.
There were. I don't know if you're familiar with the famous attorney out of Harvard, and he's sick now. I cannot think of his name. Charles Ogletree, who brought reparations lawsuits for Tulsa, and was going to use that as a jumping point and a leverage point to do a national. So I guess I was just trying to point out it has been worked on and it has been done, and clearly Tulsa was specific. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not denying that. I understand that, the lawyers and Cobra, the Black Lawyers organization, and Cobra did that in 1997 in the year 2000, and then after 9/11, everything basically stopped, because they was dealing with that. But what I'm saying is, and also every reparations lawsuit has failed in the United States courts, because it has to be a federal claim. 1988, when Japanese Americans got reparations, that was through a congressional federal executive order. It didn't come down through lawsuits in the court, because the states can't really pay it. It has to come through the federal government. The federal government has the obligation, because they legalized the institution of slavery here in the United States. They legalized Jim Crow and the other atrocities. But like I said, I'm not denying the work that Cobra or any other group has done in discussions of reparations. But what I'm saying is, it has never been this monumental since the Reconstruction era, and that is evident.
No, that's not it. That's just not historically substantiated, my brother. That is just not historically substantiated.
That's cool. I think so if we could pivot then, I think, to the next point in the discussion, and this has been great thus far. And if we can, maybe this last point as we wrap up, we've been together now for an hour almost. And I guess I want to see the kind of like what we see the end goal is. I mean, clearly I'm Black. Clearly we're all Black. We want to see us all win in this country and everywhere, for me, really. But I really want to see us win. I'm seeing, other groups and things like that, and white folks clearly are the ones who are winning. We've acknowledged that they own and control upwards of over 90% of the wealth. And to the point that Kwado made earlier, and I want us to really think about this, because we have to think about, we romanticize a lot about Black Wall Street and things like that, but the government dropped a bomb on Black Wall Street. And so if we are going to get what we need to get, how are we going to do that without a military strategy? Or has the ADOS movement considered a military strategy in terms of how we get what we need to get from this government?
No, we don't need a military strategy. We just need political advocacy and commitment. Like I said, I'll go back to the last contemporary evidence that we know what a group who experienced, some atrocities under the hands of the United States federal government. The Japanese Americans didn't have an army or a military to get them reparations. They got financial reparations and specific set-asides.
Do you agree that anti-blackness? But do you agree that there is a specific anti-blackness for Black people? And because we see other groups are passing us all the time, including the Japanese, the Latinos, everybody passing us.
Of course. That's because America created a system where we are always on the bottom. When you hold a group for 401 years at the bottom of every socio-political category here in the United States, of course you're going to develop anti-Black. That's anti-Blackness all across the globe. And I understand the globalization of the reparations claim, but we're not going to get that point until we do reparations here, specifically in the United States. Let me just give you some numbers. For example, in Boston, the median household wealth is for a white family is $247,000. For a U.S. Black family is $8. For Caribbean Blacks is $12,000. Puerto Ricans $3,020. Other Hispanic $2,700. Why is it that we've been in this country for 401 years and we're at the bottom at $8 in Boston, $200 in LA? 33% of people who live in Chicago, Black, got zero wealth. 62% are renters. Only about 31% are homeowners. The average income here, I'm just talking about income, I'm not talking about wealth. The average income here is $33,000. But Black folks migrated to Chicago from Mississippi and other parts of the South here in 1905, when there were no other individuals here but Black American descendants of slavery and white folks. However, we still at the bottom in every category in every city.
The history that you're recounting, brother,
when are we going to have the gumption to say we have to get to the specificity and focus specifically on the individuals who built this country and the descendants of those individuals, so we can really get to.
Man, we lost him.
I want to say that I'm in agreement with the history that he just recounted, but the sum total of this history I think is lost on him, which is that, yeah, the Japanese did get reparations, and that proves that this country has no will to give Black folks any type of restitution. These are repeated historical slaps in the face where it would be foolish of us to come back to them and try to propitiate the moral and ethical standard of a country that doesn't have one in regards to us. And so that's what I'm getting from the history that he's recounting here. And yeah, all of those statistics I would probably say are exactly right. We are at the bottom of all of those economic.
We really are, yeah.
Yeah, and all of those things happen in all these small micro areas and structural areas where we're devalued in certain areas. Our labor is devalued, our intellectual capital is devalued, our cultural capital is taken from us, corporatized, sold back to us in toxic form. All of those things have been happening to us. But until we have a global power source that says that we can force the issue in some geographic area, then these things will not change. I would ask people, look, people of Ashkenazi descent, the Jewish population in this country, make up, a little bit over, I think, 3% of the populace. 3%. Their wealth is much greater than ours, and if you study the histories, you will even see how, to a large degree, they have been decision makers and gatekeepers on Black culture, Black political action as well. They have a nation state where they've set in where it has some geopolitical power that this country has to be either beholden to or see it as some sort of advantage to them. And so the conditions of the United States are protected. You see what I'm saying? But we're the only ones that don't have sense enough to look at the continent of Africa as being basically the spark plug for so-called modernism and technology in this world. The scholar historian Carlos Moore says that over 80% of all of these minerals and things all came from the continent at any point in history, whether it be rubber, whether it be bauxite, aluminum, et cetera, and so forth, or to this very day, coltan, which is in the computers we're using and these cell phones that we're using. That is the wealth. So what happens is the status quo, the white status quo, convinces us to accept their definition of reality and to value our own intrinsic value in material things on the continent and our own cultural output here in the diaspora, right in here in America, you know, with these industries like hip hop, et cetera, and so forth. Even Jesse Jackson,
I just wanted to pull up. We got a little background noise. I don't know whose phone that is. I don't know if it's Maxwell or who, but there's a lot of background noise. I just wanted to pull up and as we kind of wrap the conversation up, and this is from 2020, that, and I hear this from people who travel a lot, like people who travel to the continent, Black Americans who travel. And there's a few people who are like, man, everybody in Africa, the Chinese, like all kinds of people are over there and creating relationships or trying to, you know, because Africa is home to all of the natural resources that we know that the Europeans and others have exploited. And people have been saying for a while now, and as we can see, this article is from 2020 in May, that, you know, Africa and just like China has taken a long time to take off India and all these other formerly colonized places by the Western world, will have growing economies that will eventually surpass the United States. China arguably has already surpassed the United States in terms of the largest economy, the largest GDP. And so, and with this, and I'm somebody that believes in reparations, and we have to get it how we can and where we fit in. But I also think that we should expound on opportunities the best that we can. I get that if we're homeless, I get that if we're economically castrated and we don't have access to jobs, let alone wealth, we're not going to be able to invest in Africa. But I do think that, to your point, in terms of building solidarity or global solidarity, or trying to build relationships in terms of this growing global economy, I don't know if I would totally shut the door on that either. And I just wanted to show this, and people are welcome, you know, to go and check out this article. This is also, you know, from Kenya Times, but I will say that CNBC and others who are, you know, American economists have also covered this topic in terms of Africa being a place where the economies are growing. People may remember that Twitter CEO, who we know is a billionaire, even said that he will be relocating to Africa and actually living there at least half the year. So white people, Chinese, and all these other people, you know, are looking to Africa. And I just don't want us to completely close the door in our justice claim. Even if we do get reparations, I hope there will be some way to build some global solidarity. And I want to allow you all to give your final closing comments. And I definitely hope that we can have you all back at some point as well. Maxwell, brother, I'll bring it back to you because I know we lost you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I was having some technical difficulties. But like, I would be down for the global claim if Africa as a country was united, but it's not. And I don't think we can never get to that global utopia until the countries in Africa. I know Muammar Gaddafi was on that mission, but unfortunately he was assassinated, I would say. So we have to, I'm gonna end on this. We have to understand that we are unique here in this country, and that is not to diminish, you know, who we are as diaspora. But at the end of the day, what happened in history occurred, and now we're in another country, you know, where we all have
deep lineage roots tied to. And we could never get to our justice claim if we decide to ignore who we are specifically, because you just can't get to it. Like I said, HR 40. Why is it that I was years old when HR 40 was introduced? Why is it that 31 years later it hasn't moved? And we have to question that. We really have to question that. We really have to question, why hasn't the reparations in federal and state courts haven't moved? You know, when in court and the Black law to bring the social lawsuit, why did it fail? You know, we have to ask those questions and really get down to the specificity of what ADOS is trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And I believe once individuals under are unique and specifically old here, I believe we can move forward and into securing reparations.
Appreciate you, brother. This has been great. Brother Kwado, I want to give you a final comment as well.
Okay. Oftentimes what happens with African-centered folks and Pan-Africanist folks is that something as with the magnitude of unifying African people and on a global scale for global African sovereignty, we kind of have to give these, you know, elevator pitches, you know, in a short period of time, and sort of remake the world, you know, with a solution to something that's been happening for, you know, 5 or 6 centuries and is still ongoing. But I will say this, and this is usually the illustration that I use for people who talk about, oh, the African continent isn't unified, et cetera, and so forth. It's to a certain degree is, and even with the death of the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, there's a reason why they did that. It's because
the Black president killed him, yeah.
Yeah, our Black president killed him. And there's a reason why they did that, is because ultimately they understood that what he was doing was going to work. Understand? So that's a sign that he was on the right track. I'll say this though, the Organization of African Unity is still intact and is still doing work. And when George Washington and Patrick Henry and these people like Benjamin Franklin, et cetera, and so forth, were planning a revolution against, at that time, the largest, most powerful multinational military force on the globe, the British Crown, I doubt that there were people sitting in the room calling it, you know, a utopia or a fantasy. They said, let's start doing this and let's make it happen, and let's impose our definition of reality on every person we meet. And here we are, over 2¼ centuries later, taking on their definition of a civilization or a nation state, with all of the blood of our ancestors on its hands, still trying to claim it as our own.
Yes, brother, this has been great. I actually appreciate, I hope that, you know, people actually got a lot out of this, because I felt like both of you shared historical accuracies. I still feel like we're a little fuzzy on our way forward in terms of trying to find some common ground there. But I think that with continued respectful dialogue like this and love for each other, at the end of the day, I have a deep amount of love for Black people, period. I love our folks, which is why I wanted to host this conversation, because I do see a lot of division, and that hurts. You know, I see it mostly like on social media and stuff like that. But clearly, we do have justice claims. That's absolutely right. This country, we built the country, all of those things, absolutely correct. So I just want to hats off, you know, to both of you. Thank you for being willing to come and have this discussion as a family. And I just want to encourage people to continue to tune in to this channel. I'm going to always host real talk, right? It's uncensored. We're going to have the conversations that need to be had, that other people may be scared to host on their platforms or whatever. And just encourage you all to come back every week, Thursday at 8 p.m. Next week, we'll actually be talking more about what is coming in the future. There's a lot happening behind the scenes in terms of what's being pushed by the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, Agenda 21. All of this is even connected to this conversation. If we don't understand what these white folks are planning on a global scale at the World Economic Forum, and there's actually a white woman that I'm actually bringing on the platform who is going to explain a lot of this technocracy and things that's getting ready to come. And we're going to see a major shift. And that's actually what makes me so scared, is because I know for a fact, like everything else, is going to impact Black people the hardest. Yeah. And I want to host this conversation on this platform, and I want to encourage people to come back next week, because this information is not being talked about in mainstream media. I don't even know other Black woke people that's talking about it, to be honest with you. And so I want to encourage both of you all to make sure you come back and tune in and everything. And I'll have a flyer up that we can all share. But it's a very important conversation to have. And it's not about conspiracy theories. I mean, the woman actually has proof. I mean, these people talk about it. We just don't read what they're talking about in the World Economic Forum. Like, she got the documents, and the United Nations Agenda 21 and their 20 to 30 year plan. Man, it's going to blow your mind. So anyway, this has been a wonderful discussion. I appreciate everybody. Yeah, somebody said depopulation, but yeah, the comments have been jumping, as you know. But yeah, man, technocracy, the technocrat, all of that stuff is coming, man. And I think that African people the world over need to be concerned, because they're very concentrated on the continent of Africa. They concentrated on Black folks in America. They want to target us here. Yes. So we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to continue to have real talk. Everybody who's in the comments, please subscribe. Make sure you share it out, and tell people to come back next week, Thursday at 8 p.m. sharp. Thank you, Brother Kwado. Thank you, Brother Maxwell. Much respect. Peace and love. We out, family.
All right.
Take care.